In a world driven by systems, schedules, and the relentless hum of progress, something quietly unsettles us. Beneath the surface of our routines, our ambitions, our technologies, there lies a question that refuses to die. One that no amount of achievement or distraction can drown out. What's the point of it all? Albert Camus didn't set out to answer this question with metaphysics or illusion. He confronted it directly, without flinching, without appeal to higher powers or convenient lies. He saw something that modern life rarely allows us to say out loud, that despite all our efforts to find meaning, the universe offers none in return. It is silent, indifferent, vast. And that silence echoes louder the more urgently we demand answers. But Camus did not despair. That's the mistake many make, thinking absurdism is about hopelessness or resignation. On the contrary, Camus saw this confrontation between the human longing for clarity and the universe's indifference as a starting point, not an end, a kind of awakening. What matters is not what the world refuses to give us, but what we choose to do in the face of that refusal. This is not a philosophy of defeat, but of rebellion, a rebellion without illusions. To live with the absurd is to walk a narrow path, to admit life has no ultimate meaning, yet still live fully, love fiercely, act ethically, and create passionately, without appeal, without pretending, without flinching. In this video, we're going to trace that path through Camus' core works, the Myth of Sisyphus, the Stranger, the Plague, and his lifelong resistance to nihilism and religious consolation. We'll explore how Camus builds a worldview from tension rather than resolution, one where clarity matters more than certainty and revolt matters more than belief. This is not just a philosophical journey, it's a personal one, because the absurd isn't something you read about in books, it's something you feel when life fails to answer, when suffering strikes without reason, when death closes in without warning. And yet, in the heart of that chaos, Camus finds a strange kind of freedom. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom to face reality as it is, and to still say yes. Welcome to the absurd. The absurd begins not with a scream, but with a pause. It emerges in that silent moment when the routines of life suddenly feel hollow. When a man, waking up for work, riding the same train, exchanging the same polite phrases, suddenly wonders why he's doing it at all. Camus calls this the moment of weariness that sets the world apart. The veil lifts, the machinery of habit grinds to a halt, and in that stillness, the absurd reveals itself. It is not the world that is absurd, nor the mind that questions it. It's the collision between the two. The absurd is born from the tension between our need for meaning, purpose, and coherence, and the universe's unbroken silence in return. We ask for answers, but we receive only the brute facts of existence. Mountains, stars, flesh, time, and no voice behind them. Camus refuses the old consolations. He will not run to religion, with its promises of eternal design, nor will he embrace nihilism, which drains the world of all value. Both to him are forms of escape. He calls them philosophical suicide, not because they kill the body, but because they kill the integrity of thought. To leap into faith or to collapse into despair is to abandon the absurd instead of facing it. So what does he propose? Not a solution, but a stance. The absurd man does not seek to reconcile the conflict. He chooses to live inside it. That means living without appeal, without hope of salvation, without fear of damnation, and, most of all, without lying to himself. He accepts the absurd as a fundamental condition of life, and rather than run from it, he leans in. At the center of Camus' philosophy stands the figure of Sisyphus, the mythical king condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain, only for it to roll back down each time. for eternity. The punishment seems cruel, meaningless, unbearable. And yet Camus looks closer, not at the rock, but at the man. What if, in those moments walking back down the slope, Sisyphus becomes conscious of his fate? What if he sees its absurdity and chooses it anyway? Then, Camus says, he is stronger than the gods, because he refuses to be broken. His rebellion lies not in changing his condition, but in refusing to let it define his spirit. He becomes free, not because he escapes the rock, but because he sees clearly and still continues. This, for Camus, is the prototype of the absurd hero. Not someone who conquers death or finds hidden meaning, but someone who walks straight into the void and keeps walking. Someone who finds joy not in illusion, but in defiance. Someone who looks at a meaningless life and still chooses to live. Albert Camus is often grouped with existentialists. His name appears beside Sartre, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, as if they all spoke in one voice. But Camus resisted this label, and for good reason. Existentialism to him was not the answer to the absurd. It was another form of escape, a more elegant one perhaps, more refined, but an escape nonetheless. Where Camus draws the line is subtle but vital. Existentialists like Sartre agreed with him that the universe has no inherent meaning, but for them the solution was to create meaning through freedom and choice. Existence precedes essence, Sartre wrote. We are condemned to be free. In other words, we become who we are by inventing ourselves. It is not God or nature or fate that defines us. It is our own actions. Camus admires this moral courage, but he sees a danger. The moment we begin to invent meaning, we are already stepping away from absurdity and into construction. Sartre's solution, Camus argues, replaces one illusion with another. Only now we are the gods, pretending our choices give the world a stable meaning. But if the universe is indifferent, then our invented meanings are just as fragile, just as false. And then there is Kierkegaard, the father of Christian existentialism. A man tormented by the absurd, he saw clearly the despair that reason could not escape. But his answer was the leap of faith, a surrender to the unknowable. Camus respects the honesty of Kierkegaard's anguish, but he refuses the leap. To abandon reason at the very moment it reaches its limit is, for Camus, philosophical betrayal. It is suicide of the mind. He does not want to be saved. He wants to stay awake. Even Nietzsche, that prophet of fire and will, offers no resting place. He famously proclaimed the death of God, tore down moral absolutes, and called for a new kind of man, the Übermensch, who could create values in a godless world. But Camus once again sees the danger. The Nietzschean will risks turning revolt into domination and freedom into force. For Camus, this is not the way. He offers no leap, no invention, no transcendence, only revolt. A revolt that accepts life exactly as it is, without deeper meaning, without redemption, without justification, and still says yes. Not because it is noble, but because it is honest. Because to lie, even for comfort, is to lose the absurd. This is the difference. Existentialism tries to overcome absurdity. Camus remains inside it. Where others leap toward meaning, Camus stands still. He watches the horizon, not expecting it to answer, but refusing to look away. He does not resolve the contradiction. He holds it. And in that holding, he finds a strange kind of freedom. If life has no higher meaning, no divine judgment, no eternal truth, then how should we live? For Camus, the answer is not withdrawal, nor asceticism, nor submission to despair. The absurd man does not retreat from life. He dives into it, fully, intensely, without apology. And in the Myth of Sisyphus, Camus gives us 3 portraits of those who embody this spirit, figures who, though fictional or symbolic, show us how to live without appeal. First comes Don Juan, not as a seducer in the moral sense, but as a man who chooses quantity over eternity. He loves women not to possess them, not to conquer them, but to experience love again and again, moment by moment, without illusion. He does not seek the one, or hope to find some transcendent salvation in romance. Each passion is an end in itself, and when it ends, he moves on, lucid, honest, unbroken. He is loyal to the present, not to ideals. In Camus' words, he is faithful to himself. And that, in an absurd world, is the only fidelity that matters. Then there is the actor, the one who lives many lives in one. On the stage he becomes king, peasant, murderer, saint. He does not ask which identity is true. He knows they are all masks, and he embraces them. For him, life is not about discovering a core essence, but expressing as much experience as possible before the curtain falls. What matters is not eternity, but intensity. He burns bright, not long, and when the audience applauds, it is not because they have found truth, but because they have touched the spectacle of being. Last, Camus offers the conqueror, not the tyrant or the brute, but the one who acts decisively in the face of chaos. He knows history has no final justice. He knows his victories will vanish like dust, but still he chooses to act, not for the sake of glory, but because action itself gives shape to a shapeless world. The conqueror lives as if his deeds matter, even though he knows they don't, and in that as if, he asserts freedom. He does not look for reward. His rebellion is in the doing. These absurd heroes do not seek consolation. They do not hope for meaning beyond this life. They are not deceived, but they also do not surrender. They say yes to experience, not because it is pure or justified or eternal, but because it is all we have. They refuse both the dream of heaven and the abyss of nihilism. They live, not because life is sacred, but because it is present, here, now, burning and brief. Camus does not ask us to become saints or sages. He does not demand moral perfection or ultimate clarity. He asks only that we see things as they are and live anyway, that we confront absurdity with defiance and turn our consciousness into a form of rebellion. Each of these figures, Don Juan, the actor, the conqueror, lives fully within limits. They do not transcend death, but they do not submit to it either. They live without hope and without despair. In their rebellion, there is no promise of salvation. But there is something else, something rarer and perhaps even more powerful: dignity. Philosophy, for Camus, was never just theory. It was a way of walking through the world. And while the Myth of Sisyphus lays the foundation of his thought, it's in his novels that the absurd breathes, moves, and bleeds. These are not just stories. They are case studies of the absurd in human form. Men caught in a world without why, forced to choose between illusion and lucidity, between evasion and revolt. Nowhere is this more striking than in The Stranger. Merceau, its infamous protagonist, is not a philosopher, nor a rebel, nor a villain. He is a man emptied of illusion. He does not weep at his mother's funeral. He does not pretend to love. He kills without clear motive, and he meets death without appeal to justice, meaning, or God. To many readers, he seems monstrous, detached, cold, alien. But to Camus, Meursault is something else entirely. He is honest. Meursault's crime is not the murder. His true crime is refusing to lie. He refuses to say what society wants to hear, that he felt grief, that he believes in redemption, that he regrets. In the courtroom, they are not condemning a killer. They are condemning a man who dared to live without pretending. In the final pages, as Meursault awaits execution, something changes. He accepts the absurd, not with bitterness, but with clarity. The world, he realizes, has never offered him meaning, but it has offered him the sun, the sea, the smell of salt, the warmth of a summer night. And that, perhaps, is enough. I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world, he says. It is one of the most powerful lines in modern literature, not because it offers comfort, but because it offers truth. If the stranger is the portrait of a solitary, absurd man, then the plague is something larger. A city, a people, a collective fate. Set in the Algerian town of Oran, the novel tells the story of a sudden outbreak, a plague that traps the city in quarantine, slowly unraveling the normal life of its citizens. At first, they deny it. Then, they panic. Then, they suffer. And then, some of them choose to resist. But again, Camus resists metaphors. The plague is not a symbol. It is a fact. It is suffering, random and senseless, as real and indifferent as the absurd itself. And yet, in the face of that suffering, Dr. Roux, its quiet, tireless narrator, chooses to fight, not because he believes in some grand cause, not because he thinks he can win, but because suffering must be opposed, even when it cannot be explained. There is no divine plan here, no moral lesson, just people doing what they can, for as long as they can, without illusions. The heroism in the plague is not dramatic. It is repetitive, quiet, sometimes thankless, and that is precisely what makes it noble. Camus once wrote that the absurd must never be an alibi for indifference, that freedom, if it is to mean anything, must be linked to responsibility. And in the plague, he shows us what that means. Roux does not act because the world is meaningful. He acts because it is not. Because in a silent universe, the only thing left is how we treat each other. Ethics for Camus is not born from truth. It is born from rebellion. We resist the absurd not by solving it, but by standing up within it. And we do so together. These novels do not offer hope, but they offer something else, something quieter, harder, more durable. They offer lucidity, compassion, solidarity, the strength to say, even if nothing matters in the end, what we do still matters now. That is the paradox of the absurd. Camus never claimed to have solved the riddle of existence. He didn't promise peace or hope or transcendence. What he gave instead was a mirror held up to the human condition, stripped of illusion. And in that mirror, he asked us to look not for answers, but for courage. To live absurdly is not to live carelessly. It's not to surrender to chaos or drift into despair. It's to wake up each day with full knowledge that life has no script, no final reward, no cosmic validation, and to live anyway. To choose revolt, not resignation. To act not because it saves the world, but because it affirms that we were here, we saw clearly, and we refused to lie. This is what makes Camus' thought both unsettling and deeply human. He doesn't speak from above or beyond, he speaks beside us, in the same confusion, the same silence, the same raw encounter with existence. And from that place, he doesn't offer doctrines, he offers a posture, a way of standing upright when the ground gives way, of saying yes not to illusions, but to life itself. In the end, Camus' absurdism is not a retreat from meaning. It is a demand for honesty, a demand to stop pretending and to start living with full presence, to walk the tightrope between despair and faith with open eyes, to laugh, to love, to create, not because it lasts, but because it happens. If you've made it this far, you've walked alongside Camus in confronting the absurd. But this isn't the end. It's just the first step. Ahead lies rebellion, justice, and the ethics of resistance, because once we accept the absurd, the real question becomes, how should we treat each other now that we know? That's what we'll explore in the next part of this series. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning, keep living without appeal. And if this video moved you or challenged you, leave a comment below. What's your Sisyphus? What rock do you push each day? And more importantly, do you still choose it? This is Shadow Loom. Thank you for watching.